This is the almost 30-minute quiz show with Mark and David.
Time to get your thinking caps on as we discuss
Having a stroke with meat and two veg.
who's been having trouble getting an election
What's the worst thing that could possibly happen while you're doing your homework?
and some unbelievable statistical listicle factoids for your edification.
All that in almost 30 minutes.
So, welcome to the almost 30-minute quiz. And when we say almost 30 minutes, we try and keep it under 30 minutes, which is why last week we managed 37 minutes. So the plan this week is to try and get it a little quicker and a little... Should I not whistle on the...
Well, you can whistle on the microphone if you want to.
Yeah, that's probably 4 people holding their eardrums at the moment.
Anyway, how's your 2 weeks been since we last recorded?
I moved house, so I'm half asleep and absolutely knackered.
Congratulations. Was the house heavy to move?
It was, but, you know, thank you very much for that thing with listicle, testicle and edification and trying to make me say that while I'm tired.
Well, oh, I'm so sorry. I gave you coffee.
Yeah, I might need more.
What else have we got?
We've still got the email.
Which is almost 30 quiz, and it's written out properly, almost 30 quiz @gmail.com.
And by episode 3, we might even have a post box, so you can send us letters, and within a year, we'll get your letter. We did get a letter of complaint, though. Well, it was more of an email.
Who was that? What?
Well, it was after our thing about florets and broccoli, and I'm suffering from florets. We did have a letter from the Tourette's Society complaining about that particular article. I'll read it to you. Dear almost 30-minute quiz, and at that point I need to stop because it's just a torrent of swear words.
You're a bad man.
And
right.
I've also been told not to mention Greta Thunberg this week.
Yes, good advice. Right, moving swiftly. Okay, I promise not to mention anal rape in that case.
Oh, thank God. Are you sitting comfortably?
Then let's begin. Coming up in today's program, what we do is we pose a series of questions that we will actually answer, giving the real answer and then discussing, hopefully adding a little bit of wit. But what we want is for you to also try to guess the answers to these questions as well. So as we read out 5 questions this week, which we're going to do right now.
We've got
5. We've gone down. What we want you to do is maybe hit the pause button, think about the answer, maybe write it down and see how your answer matches up with our answers.
And remember to press play again afterwards. Don't just pause and go away and go and listen to something else.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, Mark, you start with question number 1.
Question number 1. Which Prime Minister accused of a coup this week has in reality lost control of Parliament?
Question number 2. Who is healthier, a good living vegan or an old-fashioned carnivore?
Question 3. According to a YouGov poll in 2018, which is the most boring sport?
Question 4. In which town was Fawlty Towers based?
And finally, question 5. How many US states still have the electric chair as a death penalty option?
And we'll come back discussing all of those in detail and, of course, the answers after this drum roll. Unbelievably, after we actually recorded 3.5 minutes, Mark insisted that I went and made him another cup of coffee. That's why you got the drum roll, folks. So, Mark, over to you.
A very quick cup of coffee.
Is it okay?
No, but I'll drink it because there's no other coffee on offer.
I'm not.
I did want a cappuccino, but
I only have decaf.
Yeah, is that decaf?
No, that's granulated, caffeinated, but it's naff.
So if
it'll
keep me awake for another 22 minutes.
Exactly.
Okay. Question number 1. David, which Prime Minister accused of a coup this week has in reality lost control of Parliament?
Okay, so I know the answer to this because it's been the main story pretty much around the world.
Pol Pot.
It's even knocked Donald Trump off the headlines, which is quite remarkable. The UK is in absolute disarray, at least politically. As you and I have been discussing over the last couple of the weeks, the British currency, the pound, it's not in free fall, but it's losing weight the whole time, even against the dollar, which is not exactly the strongest currency in the world. And 3 years on from a referendum, when the British people voted to leave the European Union, and 3 years later, we're no closer to being there.
If not further away.
Okay, so Over to you.
Yeah, like you say, in 2016, Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, had promised a referendum on remaining in the European Union. He went into an election in 2015, and he thought that this would be a vote winner, and he won a Conservative majority, I think, for the first time since 1992. So it was an effective tactic. And he carried out his promise, which is rare in politics, to have a referendum. He campaigned not to leave the European Union. His close friend, Boris Johnson, decided to campaign against, and Michael Gove as well, who was another ally of David Cameron. So most of the parties split down remain or leave. There wasn't one party that said leave and one party that said remain. Out of the big parties, the smaller parties, like the Scottish National Party and the Liberals, mainly went for remain. And the final result was 52% to 48% to leave the European Union, which was a shock. I think when Cameron put that referendum there, he assumed people would understand the benefits, the economic benefits, the benefits of free movement, the fact that Europe was at peace, there hadn't been a war for 60 years, 70 years, that it would be an obvious thing that people would vote.
So in the wake of the election, a lot of the commentary and political statement was the people didn't really understand.
Not initially. If you then go to March 17, which was 9 months after the vote, there was a vote to actually trigger that exit. You'd had the referendum, Parliament had debated it, and there was a vote, and 498 MPs out of 650 voted to trigger that exit, both Labour and Conservative. As I said, Cameron, who was the Prime Minister at the time, had voted to remain. Because he lost, he resigned, and Theresa May took over. Jeremy Corbyn, who was the leader of the opposition, was, I think to this day, hasn't declared whether he voted remain or leave. The suspicion is that he voted leave, and most of his cabinet had voted leave because, as very left-wing socialists, they believe that the European Union is a big bankers' conspiracy, and it's better to be out of there. So both parties voted to leave, and that triggered a 2-year period that would allow Britain to negotiate with the European Union to leave in the end of March 2019.
Right.
Sounds simple so far.
Okay.
Everybody's on board.
Right. Now, David Cameron loses his job, basically.
He resigned. I mean, he could have stayed. He had a mandate to stay. He just didn't want to carry out something he didn't believe in.
Right. So in comes Theresa May as the next Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And she couldn't progress this through.
Well, she had a majority at the time of around 12. I think it was an effective majority of about 20 because there were 7 members of the Parliament that don't actually turn up, the Sinn Féin members from Ireland. So she would have had the ability at the time to do that. But she saw that the opinion polls supported the Conservatives heavily. Jeremy Corbyn was seen as a disaster, and she could win a majority of over 100. And with that majority of over 100, she could pretty much do what she wanted within Parliament. So she called an election in June 2017. Should have been straightforward. She was way ahead in the polls. The only problem was that she was utterly charmless in front of the cameras. Jeremy Corbyn, who's also relatively charmless, was promising to get rid of student debt, to spend money on everything. Theresa May lost the majority. So at that point, she had to form a coalition with the Democratic Unionists and try and push this legislation through Parliament and a deal through Parliament. Over the following 2 years, she finally got a deal with the European Union, brought it to Parliament. Parliament rejected it 3 times, either because it was too generous to Europe or people didn't want to leave. And from there on in, it's sort of gone to ratchet basically over the last 6 months.
So she did lose her job over this. She resigned, but she lost her job over this. So over the last month, we've had a new Prime Minister in the UK called Boris Johnson. What's been going on?
So Boris Johnson comes in, and at this point he's got a majority of around 2 with the Democratic Unionists. The numbers haven't gone with him. So he's got to the point where there was that deadline of March 19, they missed it. It was extended for 6 months to the end of October, to Halloween, which is quite an appropriate time for it. So he came in and said, look, we are leaving 31st of October, come what may. We'll try and get a better deal out of Europe that Parliament will pass, but he knows pretty much it's not going to go through Parliament because over the 2 years, those people that said we should leave are now like, maybe not, I don't know. They seem to think that there's an opinion that people in Parliament know better than the public, that they're acting in the best interests of the public. That vote in June, the general election, gives them the right to say, well, the referendum doesn't really count. People want us to do this. But Boris has said, we're going end of October with a deal or without a deal. And he had a very clever plan. He decided he would do something called proroguing, which does sound like sort of sadomasochism, but actually proroguing.
I thought it was a Polish boiled pastry potato-y thing.
It's very nice, actually. Pierogi.
Yeah.
So he decided to prorogue Parliament, and then that way it would stop any discussion. He would then push the no deal through, and if he couldn't push the no deal through, he would then call a general election, because again, he was riding high in the polls. Nothing could go wrong this week. The only problem was that he announced proroguing a few days too early. It allowed Parliament 3 days to debate it, push through a deal, not only to block a no deal, but to block his election. And then he sacked 21 members of his own party, which got rid of this majority of one.
Including Winston Churchill's grandson, as
Winston Churchill's grandson, Ken Clarke, who's the father of the House, the former Chancellor, the former Justice Secretary, some very senior politicians. These weren't backbenchers. These were former cabinet ministers 3 months ago that he was sacking. So he now could possibly lose his seat as Prime Minister. He may have to resign. There's talk of him being arrested if he doesn't carry on, thrown into jail.
By the way, in the list of people who've quit, not necessarily been fired, includes his own brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
His brother left, and he's as I read this week, he's the only person leaving Parliament to spend less time with his family.
Absolutely. And we've had, even as we're recording this morning, or last night, Amber Rudd, who was
she was the Work and Pension Secretary.
So she quit.
She's
overnight.
quit as well, because a lot of the middle ground Conservatives, the ones that don't want to rush towards a no deal, are very upset that 21 of their colleagues have been kicked out of the party on one vote. Whereas historically, people have voted. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn voted against nearly every Labour motion during Tony Blair's government. He was never kicked out.
You've got 53 seconds left. What do you want to say? Where are we headed?
Where are we headed? I think long term we are headed to an election. I think most of the Labour Party don't support Corbyn, and Corbyn wants to push for an election. But I think we're heading for an election, and it could go anywhere. I think the one certainty is that there's going to be uncertainty over the next 6 months while there's an election, while a new government's formed. I think the ideal scenario to get Brexit to happen is that Boris wins a majority. But the other option could be a second referendum is put through Parliament in the next couple of weeks, and they have to have that referendum before there's an election. So the whole Brexit thing may be off the table.
I think what we can say is, what a mess. We'll be back after this. Ahoy there, listeners. Welcome back to the almost 30-minute quiz show with Mark.
Hello.
And myself, David. Mark, question for you. In your opinion, who's healthier? Sort of vegan, healthy living, enjoys life, looks after themselves.
So who's healthier? And you use the word healthy living there, just to steer me one way.
No. Okay, healthy living, or the type of person who would eat steak and so on, and just old-fashioned food, perhaps enjoy chips and so on. It's actually an unfair question, and we'll get on to the why
India
in a minute.
is the answer.
The answer is India. Why do you say India?
Because the original question was which country has the most vegetarians. But anyway, having eaten lots of lovely steak at a barbecue for a friend's birthday on Thursday night, and taking a look in the mirror, the answer is definitely not carnivores. You would think it's vegetarians because the reduced fat, grease from burgers, certainly better for the environment because we're not raising all these cows and killing them. That would be the general perception. A vegetarian lives a much calmer, healthier life.
Okay, so my question, the way I worded it, wasn't really fair because I was making it very subjective rather than objective. Because, like as you said, I was saying healthy living as opposed to somebody who eats steak and whatever. I'm sure anybody listening to that was thinking, oh, somebody sitting at a table, never getting up, never doing exercise. Which is
why are you always bringing me into it?
Which is a very interesting point because I don't know to what extent that was discussed by the scientists who came up with the following pieces of information. This is something that just appeared in the British Medical Journal, which is one of the most revered medical journals out there. Research was done by it's called the EPIC Oxford Study, which was a major long-term research project looking at diet and health. And they tried to split up their test audience, their subjects, between meat eaters and, on the other hand, vegetarians, vegans, and pescatarians, pescatarians being folks who eat fish but not meat.
And for the benefit of listeners, you're a vegetarian,
I am.
and I'm a meat eater.
And you are, exactly. I'm a vegan when I'm not eating cheese and milk and eggs.
I'm a vegetarian when I'm asleep.
Exactly. So 48,000 people in this study. That's a serious number of people. It was done over a number of years. They were recruited between... Thank you. They were recruited between 1993 and 2001. Of those 48,000, 16,000 were vegetarian or vegan, 7,500 were pescatarians. Here's the two key facts that come out of all of that. The vegetarians and vegans and pescatarians had 10 fewer cases of heart disease per 1,000 people, so they get fewer heart attacks, but 3 more strokes per 1,000 people compared with meat eaters. I've not gone through the whole of the report because it's a massive medical report and I don't have the knowledge. But on the surface statistics, the heart disease, I guess, makes sense for the reasons that you outlined. But the stroke's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm wondering what that is. I mean, do we know what the cause of a stroke is? It's to do with blood flow, isn't it?
It's blood not getting to your brain, isn't it?
So, yeah. So what would cause that? Would it be maybe a lack of a certain vitamin or something that gets the blood flowing, a lack of iron? I mean, there's nothing wrong, obviously, with vegetarianism. It's people's free choice. But, vegetarian and veganism, you're taking certain things out of your diet. What you have to do is obviously try and find the right balance.
Right.
Certainly with veganism, you're missing out on calcium, milk, eggs.
It's very, very difficult to maintain that balance, especially if you don't want to take supplements.
Yeah.
So there is something known as the Eat Well Guide, and with this we'll have to finish.
What does it taste like?
It sets out the balance of food that you need, whether you are vegetarian or meat eater or whatever. And these are the 5 points. Eat at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables a day.
That's general advice for everybody.
Exactly. This is all general advice for everyone. Base meals around high fiber, starchy foods such as potatoes,
chips,
bread, rice, or pasta.
Bread and gravy and chips, lovely.
Don't forget protein from lean meat, fish, seafood, pulses, tofu, or unsalted nuts. Include dairy or dairy alternatives. Foods high in fat, sugars, or salt should be eaten less often and in small amounts. And if you are a vegetarian or a vegan, can I strongly recommend that you take a B12 supplement of one sort or another?
Oh, I take a B supplement.
A B supplement?
Yeah, it's B complex or something, so I think it's got all the Bs.
I was going to say, in your case, it would be behave.
Obese. Now to question 3. David, according to a YouGov poll in 2018, which is the most boring sport?
Okay, I have no idea. I know you've got a list of 10.
This is our listicle, obviously.
Our listicle means like a list.
And an article
yes,
put together.
Very good. Into a listicle, which rhymes with?
As opposed to a quiz, which is a test, an article, and put test and article together and you get...
Ask test. Ask article.
Testicle.
I can't do that.
Ask test.
And there is the swearing section for this week. Okay.
I've got 2 more swear words left.
Oh.
Just bear that one in mind.
Bollocks.
No, that's one of mine.
What was the question?
Which sport is dull? YouGov, blah.
There was a British comedian called Jasper Carrott, and in the 1980s he said that golf was the most boring sport on television because it was hours of televised Sky. Someone hits the ball and then the camera's going, oh my God, where is it?
And now you have Sky TV.
Sky TV.
I was very disappointed that it wasn't all golf.
Okay, golf. Forgive me, Americans, baseball.
This is to a British audience, so they probably...
I'm doing my answers. What are you saying no for?
Well, because it's the listicle, so you're knocking them off the list. This is a quiz. I ask a question, you try and get answers correct.
Oh, I see. Oh, you're knocking them off the list.
Yeah.
Right, we should have discussed this before. Oh, all right. Okay, if we're doing it like that.
But there is something very close, the British equivalent of baseball.
Cricket.
Yeah.
Okay.
I disagree on that. I think cricket can be thrilling. Especially on day 4 when
Well,
it's
that's
4
the
o'clock in the
trouble.
afternoon and you've on your 8th beer.
It's a 5-day game in its purest form. You've got to wait till 3:30 in the afternoon on the 5th day to get excited.
Possibly, it could be over in 3 days, or after 5 days there might not be a
Yeah,
result.
and people who've bought their tickets for day 5 get refunds, which is a
They're
crazy
cheaper
system.
on day 5
Yeah, it's
because the chance of it
ridiculous.
actually happening.
Ridiculous system.
So you got 2, golf and cricket.
Okay. Formula One,
That is dull, isn't it?
terrible. Absolutely boring. It's not as bad as NASCAR.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine? Basically, any sport that lasts more than 10 minutes when you are going round and round and round and round and round. I can do this for 10 minutes.
It's like when you put a red handkerchief in the washing machine and you just watch it spin round.
So, track and field, right? I actually really enjoy up to 1,500 meters running.
Yeah.
Who wants to watch a 5,000 meter race or a 10,000 meter race or
The marathon.
the marathon? Now, the marathon doesn't go round and around and around because it goes through a town, so you get pretty buildings. But for goodness sake, 26 miles, who's got the patience for this stuff?
The 40-kilometer walk. That's actually good because you can watch those people with their funny
By
little feet.
the way, we should probably stress that we're talking about this from the point of view of the spectator rather than the participants, because I can tell you as a cricket player that it can actually be really exciting and a lot of fun.
So we've got golf, Formula 1 and cricket, 1, 3 and 9. What else?
Oh, which was number 1?
Number 1 was golf.
Golf is the most boring sport.
Yeah. Shall I throw some at you?
Yeah, go on.
Number 2, American football.
Okay.
An hour of sport that lasts over 3 hours.
3 hours, agreed.
Although I quite like it because there's a lot of brutality and violence in it. And
Yeah, no, when there is action.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a sport that I find, it's not boring, but I find very difficult to follow, is ice hockey. Hockey is really exciting, but I can never see the puck.
Yeah.
It's like, where the puck?
I went to a live game at Madison Square Gardens and I still couldn't see the puck.
You went to a live game with me in Kiev.
We did, and we
First
we left.
against second.
We
in
left
the
because
team.
we had tickets for another game.
Yeah, we went to a soccer
And
game.
we got it as a freebie over lunch. Pay your bill and you get a free ice hockey game.
Anyway, if you want to get this into under 30 minutes quiz
The,
show, you've
the
got to
almost
finish off. Go on.
40-minute quiz
Yes,
show.
go on. What else
Okay,
have we got?
snooker.
Yeah, as a watcher, it's terrible.
A 2-day game watching people in waistcoats leaning
Yeah.
over and playing with their balls. Number 4 was darts. I actually think darts is quite fun. It's like short spurts. The longest game only lasts an hour, and you're watching.
I don't know.
I mean, it's a bit odd because you're just watching a board. and-
Playing is fun.
Yeah,
You and I have played in Crete.
we did.
Yes.
Horse racing.
Well, I guess it's the same theory. It's exciting. When you get up to the final line and there's 2 horses in there and it's Red Rum and it's Shergon, it's Red Rum and it's Shergon, and it's Red Rum and it's Shergon. And Shergon's crossed over the line in first place. And I sent my dog off. But that's okay. But if it's a 2-mile race, it's very dull.
It's good when they've got fences because then you can like watch them fall.
Oh, and I want to point out something. In a lot of circuits, I think in America, what do horses do? They go round and round and round and round.
It's like Formula 1. If you put a horse in a washing machine, that would be quite exciting.
I used to be a motor racing driver, but I'm all right.
Cycling.
Yes.
Which going on that basis of things going round and round and round.
Yeah.
Round. Basketball.
No, basketball is exciting.
It is, but there's just an element of back and forth and back and forth.
Okay.
It's not like football where you get like 2 goals in 90 minutes. Here it's like dunk, 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 dunk.
Okay.
And last one, and I find this one fascinating that it's in there, boxing.
I hate boxing, but it's certainly not dull.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Okay, that's our top 10 listicle for this week.
And welcome back to the almost 30-minute quiz show. Mark, where was the TV show Fawlty Towers based? Which town was it in?
Flowery Twats was in... I love that when they kept changing the sign. Flowery Twats, Fawlty Towers was in... Is that my third swear word?
Farty Towels
Farty Towels.
was based in...
Torquay.
Correct, which brings us very nicely onto...
Yeah. This section, we're going to do some hotel reviews for no reason other than we were reading them during the week and had a good laugh. I'll start with one entitled, There Was a Poo in the Kettle. We're not going to mention the names of the hotels.
Okay, we should point out, okay, we are not receiving money from any establishment for this section.
Certainly not this establishment. I don't think they'd want this out there. There was a poo in the kettle. Do not stay in this absolute dump of a hotel. And I use the term hotel very loosely. I cannot convey strongly enough how disgusting this place is. Blood-stained headboards that have clearly been up since the World War, the first one, rude staff, windows that won't close, no hot water, broken furniture, dirty utensils, broken light fittings, and an actual poo in the kettle. I don't know how you do that with the handle in the way, but there you go. Pretty sure I'm going to end up with some sort of rash disease due to the sanitation conditions similar to those of a homeless crackhead. In summary, this place is a complete hole. So I'll be booking there next week then.
But I have to point out, while it got the lowest possible rating in most of the categories, for location it got 3 out of 5.
Well, you'd be out seeing the location a lot more with that sort of review.
Okay, so the one that I've chosen for this section is a hotel in Birmingham in the UK. Awful, dead bodies found in the bath and blood-stained walls. This hotel is awful. When you walk into the check-in desk, the stench really does hit you. The smell of poo and urine inflated my nose. I got to my room, and the room number was clearly written on by a 2-year-old girl with a Sharpie. I entered the room, and the windows were blood-stained and couldn't close.
There seems to be a blood theme to all of these. This is how you get a bad review. Don't remove the blood of the previous dead person.
They were jammed. You didn't even get a key card. It's a key that smelled like poo. I looked out of the window.
Who's the key?
I looked out of the window at about 3 a.m. and heard strange noises coming from the cupboard.
The cupboard was outside the window.
I did. I turned on the lights, examined the cupboard with closer inspection, but nothing was there, just the smell of mouldy onions and cheese and urine. On the desk came a telly that had a crack on its screen and only showed BBC Look North in Chinese. There was a bottle of urine, U-R-I-N-G, yes, in the wardrobe that the shoddy little cleaners forgot to clean up. There's also blood stains in the shape of a human hand in the bath. I looked in the cupboard underneath the sink in the bathroom, and there was a blood-stained knife. I think God be making this up.
Is it called the Bates Motel?
The beds were like sleeping on a pile of stinky pebbles.
Smell of poo.
That had been put on an anvil. I'd rather have steeped in my Mercedes. This hotel is really awful, and absolutely do not recommend it to anyone, even if you're homeless.
I'm not sure I can. Okay, this one's grim up north. Where do I start? Well, positives, I think. Next to the #1 bingo hall in Blackpool, Las Vegas. And I'm afraid that's where the fun ends in this place. Step throughout the door to a wall of smell. We came with the money agreed, and he asked for £20 each for a deposit. Needless to say, we are 16 big fellas, and we did not agree to his demands. Anyway, we were a group of lads on a stag, so it would take more than a bad smell to put us off. Me and 3 other boys, this is great just for the English, me and 3 other boys were put in a room for 4 people, which consisted of a bunk bed and a double. So it looks like me and me mate were spooning for the weekend. Carpet was filthy as dirty den, and the gippers exposed. Sink was coming off the wall, and the wall was covered with blood and sick. Looking through the doors, there was evidence of drug taking with empty bags covered in a white substance. Having only seen drugs on the telly, I presume that this was what it was. I made a complaint about this. He said sorry, and if I wanted any drugs, he could make a call. Having had a long drive, I decided to take a shower. I managed to get a cold trickle out of the hose. I think we're still talking about the shower, not enough to wash my hair. For this, I had to get on my knees and place my head under the taps. Having not realized the lock was broken, I turned around to find the owner staring at me smiling. I swore at him and he ran out. As I came out, he was at the bottom of the stairs. He shouted up saying I was a big boy, both in body and girth. He then went off and offered me drugs again, but steroids this time. I said, I don't do steroids. It's 5 hours in the gym each day.
It's what?
5 hours in the gym each day that keep me like this. In my friend's room, the wallpaper was coming off the walls and looked like it had been burnt. The lock was broken on his door and everything was broken. Anyway, we went out, and to give it its dues, it's close to everything. And we made sure we got hammered so we'd be able to sleep.
Absolutely brilliant. I don't know where you go from there, but I'm going to ask you a question, and with this, we will close this week's edition. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you while you're doing your homework?
Realising that I left school 31 years ago, and my homework's going to be slightly late.
Yeah, but people do homework when they're older. That's a good answer. But the headline that I found, which is from a Shanghai newspaper, so forgive me, my Chinese, reads, "Computer electrocutes sweaty student."
Was it in a hotel?
It sounds like it, doesn't it? And it smelt of poo. I'll read it because it's three
Was it
lines
near a
long.
kettle?
It's three lines long. A college student was so worried about his expenses, he refused to turn on his air conditioner even when he noticed it was hot enough to overheat his computer. 20-year-old Wu, a student from Shanghai, decided instead to take off the computer case around his CPU to help it cool off. His sweaty legs came into contact with the computer's wiring and electrocuted him. Medical examiners found bruises on his legs and blood in his nostrils, confirming death by electrocution. So what's the message out of all of that?
Make sure that you've got a cushion on the floor if you're going to sweat near your laptop because you don't want bruises on your legs.
Fair point. And on that joyous, happy note, we end this week's edition of the show. Final message, Mark?
We never mentioned VAR.
Well done. And we did get in our quota of swearing.
I thought we were one short.
No, we're not going to finish on a swear word.
Oh, bollocks.